noise. There we are. Okay, thank you so much for being here. I'm Kelly. It's nice to officially meet you on Zoom, and I'm co-hosting with Ivana.
Hi, Kelly or Emily. Thanks for coming.
Oh my, thank you. I just want to start with a bit of gratitude. I just feel just so loved on by all of you, especially Kelly and Ivana. I feel like I've known you for much longer. It's I'm like, how has it only been a couple of months since we first started interacting? So so much has happened with the book, and I just know it's because of word of mouth and great readers like yourself. So I'm just entirely grateful and indebted to just yeah, your love for the book. And I'm so looking forward to hearing, yeah, what you have to say tonight and answer some questions.
Well, likewise. Yeah, we just had a really awesome book club chat. I felt like we could have we really just like tapped the surface even after chatting for a half hour, because there's so much to unpack with this story. And I think it is so worthy of all of the praise and things that it has gotten, like the Indie Next pick and the book of the month and all of these fun things that have come your way. So we're so happy for you, especially as somebody who read the book. I think I was saying I read it in June. And I was like, oh my goodness, this book needs to come out now, because I'm so eager for people to love what I'm loving. And that's definitely been the case. So we're so thrilled for you.
Thank you. Is it just June? I think there's like a time warp thing when you're promoting a book where I just still feel like, wait, like I like just came out this tunnel and can I start over in July? Like fall. Like I remember when we picked this date, it felt so far away.
It
But
did. Yeah. But here we are. Yes. So to get us started, Ivana and I will just ask a couple questions, and then we have a lot of questions from other people in our group. We've all, like I said, read the book and loved it, so we really welcome spoilers and any little behind the scenes things that you want to offer us. To kick us off, can you tell us just about your inspiration for the story? Like, how in the world did your mind like conceive of this? I would love to know.
that's a great question. When I first started being asked this question, I kind of would like give part of the answer, but I'm just starting to say the whole truth. And that is part of me has no idea. I have no idea where this came from, but I can play like kind of psychological detective and go back in time in my life and like think about what I was going through. And so in hindsight, I can kind of like figure out how this idea came to be. I was living in LA at the time, and I was just feeling a lot of disillusionment with what I was doing in work. And I was questioning the meaning of work and art. And I was also at that time in my 20s, I don't know if this happens to everybody, but it happened to me profoundly, where everything I thought I knew for sure was just kind of falling apart. Like some long-term friendships had just yeah, they'd run their course. And I really was just wondering who I was going to be in this next like part of my life. And I think in hindsight, I was probably the one transforming into a great white shark. I felt so foreign to myself and really like I was living this life that didn't fit me anymore. And I didn't quite know how to get to the next place. And so I think part of, the inspiration of and kind of the absurdity and the strangeness of the idea was the fact that I was feeling super strange in this time. And even though nothing externally about me had changed, like I felt like so dramatically different. I might as well have been turning into a shark. And so through the course of writing the book, I ended up like uprooting myself and going to graduate school. And I really found that graduate school was such a good time. I didn't study writing. I did something completely different. But I really got to like dig into these questions I had, kind of these existential questions about what do we do with all the grief in this life? How do I master change? Is that possible? And I think I made friends with those questions, both in grad school and in writing this book. And I don't have any answers still, but I think writing this book definitely helped me make peace with a lot of the uncertainties that are just inherent in being a person.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you just have these questions that you just kind of pose to the reader.
Mhm.
Like, what do you think about this? Or what do you really think about this? Or what if this small thing happened? Do you still think that? And I loved that you were able to touch on so many things through animals.
Mhm.
I'm curious how you picked the specific animal to
Yeah,
include.
I love this question because again, like part of it was just so instinctual. And I I think I was really drawn to predatory animals because they're so provocative and just fascinating to watch. Like whenever I'm watching a nature documentary, the predators are always the ones that I like cannot look away. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's the way that they are kind of ruthless in the way they hunt their prey, whether it's a bear or a Komodo dragon or a shark or a killer whale. Like all of those animals are just so interesting to me. Like um, maybe the fierceness and the way they render other things in the world so vulnerable. And so so I thought it was really provocative, and I knew it would raise the stakes in the story to have animals that were dangerous. It would be a really different book if it was like a poodle or something that Lewis transformed into. And I kind of know an idea feels right to me when I'm working. If I just get this like kind of like tingly excitement feeling in my gut where I'm like, kind of the time stops and I'm really interested in that. Um, when I start feeling distracted, I know I'm like, okay, maybe that's not it. It's not interesting enough to hold my attention. So yeah. Again, though, I think it was one of those things where I like immediately had the idea and then later I'm like piecing together how I came to that.
Yeah.
That's where I was going to go with that too, because of we've talked before you hopped on here about the format that you chose with the play and with the short little bursts, and it
Mm-hmm.
made for such fun and different reading. I mean, everyone here was saying we just haven't read a book like it. I also really want to know what you did before this and how did you ever, how did you come from where you were to writing your first novel being so completely different from anything that people have read, really?
Oh,
It's like
cool. Well,
a
I'll
two-part.
answer both of those questions at once because it kind of, I think they
Yeah.
connect. So I grew up like doing theater and acting and telling stories. And I went to college and did an acting conservatory and really was like, had my identity, like, was like, I know who I am at age 18, which is, kind of was really sure that this is what I'd be doing for the rest of my life. And so I moved out to Los Angeles to work in Hollywood right after college. And I soon realized that I did not love the craft of acting enough to keep hustling in that town, especially what it demands of women. And it didn't take me long to realize that I had enough. And I always loved writing, and writing had been, I know this sounds so silly, but it felt like my secret art form, like what I'm not really supposed to be doing. Like I'm supposed to be loving acting, but instead I like writing more. And so I just had like, I just had fun with it. It wasn't something that I shared with anybody. It wasn't attached to my identity. And I think that was just such a gift of that time. And so I changed gears from acting and was like, well, I want to learn as much as I can about writing for TV and film. And so I had a bunch of industry day jobs. I worked like for a talent agency, and I worked at a production company, and then at a movie studio. And so I was reading a ton of scripts like all the time. And I love how um, you can read a script in a night. I mean, it's dense reading, and you have to do a lot of imaginative lifting as a reader because the playwright or the screenwriter is not giving you details like he said, she said, the house looks this way, they're feeling this way. You have to kind of be the director in your mind and imbue those characteristics into the script. And so that was just the world that I was in. And I really appreciate how plays, especially like stage plays, are so lean in the way that they're written because it really leaves just a lot more space to the individual production. Well, of course, depending on the play, to make those choices. And I think I was just coming to the book from that place where I like, for me, like writing scripts is just as natural as writing prose. And a lot of my dialogue in those early drafts just felt kind of spare, like a script. And I was like, well, what if it actually is a script? And then as the characters started to reveal themselves and I decided Lewis is a theater teacher, I was like, well, let me just play with this as a form. And I realized that, it was really fun to write that way. And the great thing about a first book is that nobody gives a damn. And so I was just like, I'm going to do it the way that I want. And so I never questioned that I was like breaking rules or doing anything different, because it just felt fun and like the right way to tell the story. And my editor later, when the book sold, like didn't like have a problem with it. So I just like kind of got it all the way to the finish line, doing whatever the hell I want. So I think when people are like, oh, this is experimental, or I did not feel like I was experimenting. I was just like having fun. Like, this is how it felt natural to tell the story. And I think I'm also a reader. I love to read. I'm a writer who loves to read. That's probably true for most writers, but this is obvious, but books have a lot of words in them. And I can often feel so claustrophobic on the page sometimes after a long day. Like, I want a rich story, but I need just like a light touch mentally. And I think poetry offers that, but often not a full narrative. And so I think it kind of spoke to this place I was in my life where I was working a lot and at a certain time in writing this, working and going to school. And so I wrote the book that I probably wanted to read, which is something that felt like rich with emotional life, but also just not a ton of labor, to get myself through the page. And I think there is a time and a place for a dense book and a hearty read. But I don't think that has to be all the time. And that's where I fell with this, I think, in writing something that has a structure and form like this.
And that's like what Mikey says in the chat. The space has helped tell the story. Free, open, propulsive. I feel like that's so true. You made it fun for us to read, and I'd say easier too, because when I hit those little short spots, I was like, okay, I can do this, for a few minutes and then come back to it. And
yeah, totally. And then I was like, later in the editorial process, it's amazing in these creative moments where like things I didn't intend start to make sense in the larger scheme of the book, because I wrote it pretty chronologically, at least in the way that it's laid out. And so by the time I got to the ocean, I was like, oh my gosh, like all this space that I've laid out earlier in the book really creates this sense of like just open ocean endlessly on the page. And so I mean, I did not plan that, but it was nice that it worked out that way, that I had already set that up earlier in the book. And so I tried to use as few words as possible to get the point across in that section in particular.
Yeah, I think people appreciated that. They said, with the heaviness, it kind of gave some balance, and then it allowed opportunities to reset. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad. That's so nice to hear.
So I'd like to go back to kind of your publishing journey that you touched on a little bit. And when you were agenting this book, or like you've written this and you're trying to get it out into the world, like, did you tell friends and family, like, this is what my book's about? And, or like when you're trying to pitch this to people, are people like, huh? Or who really got on board with you and was like, yes, let's do this?
I'm an introvert, and my friendships are like very few but deep. And I think maybe all of my friends have the same level of weirdness as me. And so they're just like, cool, that sounds great. Like, can't wait to read it. And my mom was actually a big support for me. She's such a prolific reader. And so she was like she was like my writer's group. I don't have a writer's group. I really, maybe someday I will if I find the right one, but I really work best with just a couple of select readers. And I'm not someone who has trouble with accountability or anything. And so, yeah, it was a pretty isolated process. And so I think maybe 2 people had read it by the time I started sending it to agents. And it really came together a lot faster than I ever would have imagined. It was like a couple of months between starting the querying journey and then having a book deal. And my agent had amazing notes before we took it out widely to editors. And she, it was like, you know, I'm living in this bubble where I like to get feedback from such few people, and when they are people that give me notes, it's people that I've known for a long time. And so having that experience of having notes from an outsider, from this like really tight inner circle, was a really good experience, because she's a wonderful editor as well as an agent, just in the way that she thinks and understands the market. So yeah, it was really smooth. And I mean, the process as a whole, like I cannot say enough about how wonderful Simon & Schuster has been. All the support internally, just from sales to marketing, and my team there is so wonderful. I think people often want to hear about stressful stories in the publication journey, but I really just love that team, and I just can't wait to keep working together. And they all got it. I don't think they thought it was strange. And so it was kind of funny when it started to go out, and I was like, oh wow, like maybe this is kind of a weird premise. But I didn't realize it until like this year. So I don't know what that says about me.
No, that's great. It was, yeah, I thought bizarrely beautiful to me, like was the perfect way to describe it. So as you were going through this process, were there any major plot points that changed, or like an ending that changed, or things that were edited along the way that you could speak to?
Oh, for sure. I revise a lot. I don't even know how many drafts. Like I couldn't tell you. I love to rewrite. For me, like the blank page is like pretty horrible. But once I have something, I can like remold and cut and scrape away. That is just an amazing process for me. But I feel like it's sometimes a slog getting to that first draft of things that I can begin chopping up. It's almost like I don't have clay. I have to like make the clay before I can mold it. And so many things have changed. I'm trying to think of something specific, but oh, well, the ending did change. When I sold the book to Simon & Schuster, my editor, Mary Sue, thought that the ending needed to be a little bit more concrete. I can talk about the ending, right?
Yep. Yeah,
okay.
It's good. Yep.
Spoil away. Yeah, so the ending was a little vague. Like it was almost like a silhouette of a chapter. Like Ren was like with a child, and it could be Ren, but it might not be Ren. It was like written in a scene, like woman and child. And I think I was really afraid to commit to that for her. I like it was, and I think that was why I didn't make it real. And my editor was like, why don't you just actually write like her with write the real child? I'm like, oh yeah, like that. I don't know why that felt scary to me. I think maybe I was just really feeling in sync with the character, and I was afraid for her. And so I had to really like go into myself and be like, okay, like I have to commit to Ren's new life. She can't just be in this liminal space. And maybe that reflects a little bit of my own ambivalence around motherhood as well. And so when I was working on this, my friend Abby, I don't have small children, and I don't spend a lot of time around children. And so I was trying to like get into the head of a little girl. And my friend Abby has a daughter named Joy. And I was talking to her, doing research for an earlier part of the book about, you know, when Ren is a baby, and was like, you know, what are babies like? What is your life like? And so then when I started to write this like ending and make it more concrete, I was like, oh my gosh, like, can I literally just write your daughter, Abby? Can I use her? And she was okay with it. And she didn't even want to read it. She was like, I'll just read it when it's published. I was like, wow, you trust me that much? I was like, Joy is 3. Like, can she consent to this? And so I thanked her in the acknowledgments. And someday when she's a teenager, she might be embarrassed. But yeah, it's like a real girl. And her name just happened to work really well in the book as well.
That's so fun. We've got a couple questions in the chat, and then we've got a bunch of questions that people have submitted too. So we'll kick it off. Carrie, are you free to ask your question about the animal mutations?
Yeah, I'm
okay.
free. So Emily, thank you so much for being here. This is such a gift to have you here, because I know we have so many questions about this book. Thank you for writing this book. It was beautiful. I loved it. this question is basically going to be about why did you pick the animal mutation? So, from my viewpoint, I'm a home care physical therapist. So, I deal with a lot of patients who have, progressive neurological diseases, Alzheimer's, MS, Parkinson's. So, as I was reading this, I thought, I wonder if she has a certain human diagnosis in mind that
Yeah.
Lewis is going through, or if Angela's going through. So I was just curious, is there a human diagnosis linked?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for your kind words about the book and also for the work that you do.
No, thank you.
Caregiving is so important and undervalued. And I thought a lot about that as a whole, like, especially as a woman, like how so often caregiving falls to women. And like, I don't know if we actually have more ability, or is it just like learned, like, who knows? But to answer the main question, I wasn't thinking about a specific illness. Like I do have dementia in my family, and that was actually happening while I was working on this book. My grandfather was declining, but I wasn't, it was like very on the periphery for me. I think I was more thinking about just transformation as a whole and the way that we just become different people throughout life. And especially being in relationship with people as we transform throughout life. That to me was really, I think, where the heart of where I was going. And the fact that it resonates with people who are, I didn't realize this as I was writing it. It's like so many things, but that it's the metaphor is you can project whatever you want onto it. And I think that is just such a gift that I never imagined in writing this. But yeah, that was my idea when I was thinking about it. And but yeah, I have received like so many messages from different readers. Like one woman was saying her daughter was going through a gender transition, and another person wrote me and said that during the pandemic, her husband, who was a lifelong Democrat, became a Republican. And this was like something that helped her realize like how to, like, this is spoke to what she experienced with her husband. And I'm like, just like the broad array of things that people can map onto this has been really cool to hear.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Well, you did a fabulous job, and especially the caregiver standpoint, because there is such burden on the caregivers in these homes with these patients. I felt the weight of that with Ren and Angela. You just did a fantastic job, and you created all the emotions. I think you're going to keep Kleenex in business because I think we all sobbed so much. So beautiful job.
Thank you so much, and great question.
I know that Stephanie, Stories with Steph, are you on? She had some questions too.
Yeah. Yes, I am. Hi, thank you. So I was wondering if there was an intentional connection with the bird because of the name Wren, and then also how she befriended the that pregnant woman who ended up having twin bird children. So I didn't know, was that intentional that there was that bird connection between the two of them?
This is crazy. I was not thinking about that. It's but again, it's like, okay, like if I like really step back and like play psychologist in my own mind, I'm really a big sky person. Like I think that the land is very beautiful, but when I'm from Oklahoma, and so it's just big sky country and sweeping sunsets and big rainstorms. And I think I've always just been interested in the upward realm. And I wonder if that has something to do with why I chose so many birds.
Okay. Very interesting. Another question related to the tiny pregnant woman is I really was intrigued by her role in the story because she kind of like came in and touched Ren's life in a certain way. And then all of a sudden, like it was she was gone. But I was fascinated at how calm she always seemed, considering she knew she was pregnant with these twin birds, and she totally understood that she would either die or be significantly impaired by carrying them to term, and she still chose to carry them to term, knowing that that would happen, and she seemed totally calm about all of it. She didn't seem stressed or anxious or frazzled in any way. So can you talk a little bit more about her character?
Yeah, well, for one, if I ever wrote like another book related to this book, I think it would be about her. She's so different from me. And it was a character that just dropped into my mind. And I just felt like I knew her. She was so complicated, and intense. Like, I was just like the fact that she's this endurance athlete, like doing these impossible feats, like swimming. I've tried to swim for exercise, like when I'm injured, and I'm just like, this is so hard. Any of you who swim, I'm just like alone in your thoughts in the pool, and like running 100-mile races. Like, those are people who can really compartmentalize their suffering and exist in different parts of their mind. And that to me is just such an interesting quality. I don't have that. I like have to feel everything immediately as soon as it happens. And otherwise I feel terrible. But I know people who move through the world and their ability to do that. Like when something happens, they can just kind of put it away and not think about it, or choose not to think about it. And I think I was also just pretty enraged by the reproductive rights news in the US last summer. And that element had always been there. And I think as I was rewriting it and putting those final edits in, I just thought a lot about her, and like her existing in a world where the woman is not put first, that like either in her like religious circle or in her own mind, she feels that this is the right thing to do. And so someone who's always chosen intense things, like it made sense that she would choose this as an intense thing to risk. And also someone who's deeply unhappy, like really maybe doesn't see any joy in life. And I've also never seen in a book, or at least that I can think of, those friendships that are like friends for a season. I think so often in books, like there's the readerly inclination to want to have everything tie together, and like, but for me, she didn't feel tangential, because that's just what life is. There's so many people that I've just been kind of like we were friends because we lived in the same apartment building. We were friends in childhood and nothing happened, but the friendship just didn't have a purpose anymore. And I think I wanted to represent that as well, because that's just also so true to life.
That's so true. And you touched on one of my follow-up questions actually to that too, was there an intentional political connection to the idea of abortion? Because it came up for like like this brief moment, and I was like, oh yeah, nice to slide that in. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, like I'm a woman who can use my voice in this time to say what I believe in. Like, I know people are going to disagree for various reasons, but I just felt like it was important to do that.
So sorry, I have two more questions. One is, I was wondering if there was a reason why you included some transitions. People were born as animals, like those twin birds were going to be born as animals, whereas other people transitioned at various times of their life. And even within that idea, some of the transitions were more gradual, very slow, and others came on more abruptly. So was there any like intention behind that, or what was the idea behind that?
Yeah, I think I was, I don't think I was really too concerned with world building and the science fiction sense where like everything had to kind of lock in perfectly. But in the like larger scale of the metaphor, I suppose, like people are born with challenges they face challenges later on in life. Challenges come on slowly, and I think I was thinking more along those lines of, especially people who are born with disabilities, like that might be something that affects them or they feel different. And then of course there are long-term illnesses that make us not who we were before. And then I like something that has occurred to me. I mean, this is not really your question, but in hindsight, like if I could do another draft, I I think I was thinking so much about Lewis and Angela's change into animals and like the loss of their humanity, like that they weren't also going into being something beautiful and whole, but really like a great white shark and a Komodo dragon are like as old as the dinosaurs, and like they are apex predators in like the highest sense of the word. Like they're not like us with like soft skin and like big brains. Like they're fierce. And I think like Lewis and Angela became something perfect. And like I think if you see the animal transformations as like a metaphor for a kind of death, like it also aligns with kind of this question of what if like this human journey is actually not the best part? Like what if whatever comes after, who knows what that is? What if that's actually the better deal, or what we're preparing for? I watched this George Harrison documentary on Netflix about once a year. It just is so inspiring to me. Like there was a certain point in his art form with when he kind of split off from the Beatles, and his work became about preparing to die well, about leaving his body in a beautiful way and not clinging to anything, and just being very present with what's beautiful in the moment. And I think about that a lot. And so maybe that will unconsciously come up in my work later. But yeah, I think the animals can hold all kinds of, meaning. Whatever you do with it is fine with me.
My last question was about this theme that I picked up on of abuse. I noticed there was some alcohol abuse, there was some physical abuse, there was some drug abuse. And so I'm wondering, was that an intentional theme that you intended amongst the variety of characters?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think abuse is just a painful part of life in so many relationships and families. And I think abuse creates trauma that makes it hard to love. And I think for Ren, like I was really thinking about how she is an amalgamation of all the people that have come before her, both in real, like material ways, but also like in spiritual ways too. Like she never met her grandmother, Colleen, but she is really impacted by her through how she treated Angela. And so I think like often about in my own life, like I'm such an anxious person sometimes around such silly things. And I'm like, I wonder if like something happened like 3 or 4 generations ago that where this anxiety was kind of like passed on. And I think that's really true for people, and something I wanted to reflect in the book. So a question I get asked a lot is like, was I thinking about intergenerational trauma? And I don't think I was consciously thinking about it, but I was thinking about how we are so often impacted by all the people that came before us.
Thank you. I found so much meaning in so many parts. And I know I was told like you have to read the physical book. I did the audio book and I just loved it. And I feel like from talking with other people, I feel like I was still able to get all of those same ideas and everything from the audiobook. And I'm sure I missed like all of the beautiful poetry formation and everything. I know that had a lot of meaning as well. But I just feel like there was so much in this book that was like so impactful and meaningful. So I appreciate it. Yeah.
Well, I've heard from people that have read the audiobook and read the book. And so I get the audiobook holds up. I haven't listened to it, but maybe I will one day.
It's well done, I think.
Okay, good. They did a good job.
Let's see. Marnay, are you free to chat?
I am. Which question do we want?
You go with whatever you want.
The pregnancy question or the pair question?
Let's do both.
Okay. I'll lead off with the pair one, I guess. So
Okay.
there was in 2 places. One time it's Angela dreaming and she wakes up and she's like, "Oh, I dreamed I was a pair, not a pair stem." But I couldn't fly and I was sinking. And then later Lewis as a shark has the same dream. And I'm just like, it was beautiful. I loved it. I don't get it. What did I miss?
Okay, so this is based off a painting that I love. And because you are like in my office, I can show you this, I can show you the painting. But it's kind of haunting because, well, I can't do two things at once. So let me find the painting and then I will talk. So just bear with me here. I usually have it bookmarked. Oh, here it is. This is so wild. I reorganized my bookshelf yesterday, and this book was like not right here when I did it originally. Okay, so let's see. So this is like the actual. I don't know if you can see it, but he's like, oh, so he's like a man. Is like arms are the leaves, and it's by this artist Vladimir Kush, and he does like all of these beautiful kind of mythical I don't know, symbolic paintings. And I just find them really inspiring there's not much visual art that like directly like gets my brain fired up when I'm writing. I love visual art, but for something about his work just always like reminds me of a story. And what I like about that picture is that there's this idea of like you have so much fruit beneath you and so much abundance and the seeds for growth, but you can't fly. So it's like this paradox of like being like stuck between places. And so I was really thinking about how each of them in that moment were in this place of just liminality, of being in between. And yeah, I imagine it'd be like, oh, so wonderful to have the potential inside you to be like, have that fruit, but then to be the stem of the pear, you can't fly or you're stuck there. So I was thinking about that for both of them. And I just love this painting. At one point I asked my editor, I was like, do I need to like ask permission to use this? Like, and she was like, no, like you're not showing the picture. All the permissions things are so interesting in publishing, like what you have to ask for when you quote different works and stuff like that. But anyway, so yeah, stem of the pear.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love it just even without the context, but with the context, that's perfect. So thank you.
Thanks for asking. That's the first time anyone's asked me that.
My other question, and I was telling Kelly and Ivana earlier today, I don't know why I'm stuck on it because I'm fine with people turning into sharks and dragons. I got it. You know, I'm fine with, the birds. I got it. That's fine. That's great. But I was stuck on when did Ren get pregnant? And I'm like, did she just have a really long pregnancy? Did she get pregnant in the kiddie pool in the backyard? And I'm just, did it just happen?
Was more explicit in a previous draft, but then it became just kind of like weird body horror. And I wanted to retain its like sweetness and its G-ness, like I didn't want it to be too weird or sexy. But I imagine like the scene in the bathtub when he's like, just like stay for another minute, that was when she was conceived. And I also imagine that Ren's someone who's really like cognizant of her cycle, but when she's stressed, she probably everything goes berserk. And so she probably realized it later than she might have if everything were normal in her life. But yeah, I really tried to make a decision there that wouldn't be jarring. Because the tone has like when people say a love story, I think that can sometimes be lumped in with romance, which can sometimes be lumped in with like romance erotica, which is a totally different thing. And I wanted it to stay kind of in the heart space. There's so much body stuff happening that I didn't want it to become like distracting or a focal point to think about their like private lives, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. It totally worked. And like I said, I could roll with it, but I kept coming back to it. And since we were talking to you anyway, I was like, oh, I can ask.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
Thanks for asking. Yeah, that was a line I was trying to walk, but
I like
all about tone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Jessica, are you free right now? Jessica came in.
I am. So I had to take my puppy outside, so I'm outside. But I loved your beautiful book. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I also really, really love the cover, and I was just curious about if there's any meaning behind the flowers inside of the shark shape. I mean, it's just beautiful. And
Yeah.
then I don't I love this, and I guess I just don't have a lot of books that are like this, but the texture on the cover,
Right?
I
I
just
felt
kept
it too. I had
I
nothing
just
to do
kept
with that. I had nothing to do
Ah,
with that. Um,
I loved it. And I kept having to, like, as I'm reading, like, okay, this feels so calming and good.
it's a little tactile experience there. Okay,
It
so
is.
I have to talk about this texture. So I was signing like a big stack of books at a bookstore, and I realized that some of them are bumpier than others. So I hope you got a really bumpy one.
I think we're all rubbing our books
Like-
right now. Mine's
just
not
like-
that bumpy. That's
Just feeling up all the shark hearts.
yeah.
Mine I could really feel. Very
Okay, good. You're got like a freshly stamped one. Okay, but the cover itself, yeah, I had nothing in my mind of what I thought the cover should be. And I knew they were working on it, but when this came back, I was just like, whoa. It was beyond anything I could have imagined. They showed me like 14 different ones, and they all kind of had a collage type feel, but our eyes kept coming to this one. And the flowers were completely different. And as you know, part of the book takes place in the Great Plains. And so I was like, why don't we use native wildflowers of that area? And so, yeah, I asked my mom to like go into the yard and like take some pictures. And so a lot of the flowers are like from her pictures. There's like the Oklahoma State flower. It's like, let's see. It's this one right here. And right, I'm not good at like mirroring here. Okay, so that's the Oklahoma State flower, and this is like the bluebonnet, the Texas bluebonnet. And they haven't come up with more politically correct names for flowers in Oklahoma yet, but this is a Indian blanket, and the one on the inside here is Indian paintbrush. And so, yeah, I felt like it became an object that was like very much of the place. And they didn't ask me like, to create some kind of meaning around it, but I really feel like it's just this, I don't know, this, I keep using this word, but amalgamation of places. Like Lewis is from Texas, which is like prairie, which is also a type of horizon. And then he goes to the ocean and there's a horizon there. So I feel like having him kind of exist in both worlds, like in flowers, but also like the grass at the bottom could also be like the seaweed or something, but it's also pictures of grass that my mom sent at the same time. And I also think having the flowers there just like represents a new beginning, that this is not going to be a little life. I don't know if you read that book, but you look at the cover of that book and you're like, oh yeah, this is not going to be a book about like a new beginning. And so I feel like having the spring flowers there really set the reader up that hopefully it's hopeful as well as hard.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. And I love all the different flowers that you just pointed out. I had no idea that there was a meaning for some of them. So
yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. Great question.
I think Leanne had a question about our town.
I just wondered if there was any significance to it, to the choice of using that play. It was also just kind of funny to me that it came up in two of the big books of the summer. I thought that was
talk to Ann Patchett about this, but I am really happy about the coincidence.
Yeah. But so I read that one first. No, I read yours first, but I just wondered if you had chosen that for any particular reason.
Yeah, I love the play. It's been my favorite play for a long time. I was in the play when I was like 9 years old, and I didn't really know what it meant. But as I returned to it in different stages of my life, I found it gets like more and more profound. Like I see myself in different characters, and I felt like for a book that's about being in the moment and living life to its fullest, even with its losses, that it really I don't know, it paired well with what I was trying to do.
I agree. I think it was a great choice.
Thank you. Have you read it?
I haven't in a long time. I need to go back and actually read it. I've seen it a couple of times, but it's been a really long time, and I'm not much of a theater person, but I love that play.
Yeah.
And so
I think
I
we're going
need
to
to
be
go
seeing,
back again.
I think we're going to be seeing productions of it. I think there's like a consciousness thing happening where we all need our town. Like it's a play for this time. Like what other explanation can there be? I heard recently that there's like a documentary coming out about our town productions across the US. And I'm like, what is going on? Like this is wild. So
Is
I don't
there
know.
is there a production that you've seen that's been filmed that you would recommend? I mean, I've heard it's easy to read, but
Yeah, it's so much better to watch always. Yeah, I haven't seen a film production. The last production I saw was actually probably 10 years ago.
okay.
Um, but it's like it's one of those plays that even if it's like done with like, not the greatest actors, the words themselves are so beautiful that it can still be good. That's good writing when you make that whole production look good. So
You've inspired me to go back and watch it again.
yeah,
Thanks.
thank you. Oh,
Melissa,
someone has a question.
oh yeah,
I want to watch the Paul Newman one on YouTube. I'm going to make a note. That sounds like a good plan for tonight.
Mikey says in the chat, get Ann Patchen on speed dial.
If only.
Get her here.
Where is she?
So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, I know that this feels unfair. I always feel bad asking this question because it's like we're just celebrating your book in this moment, but like it just begs the question, what is next for you? Because like where do you go from here? I just feel like, are you going to take a little break? Or are you working on something else? Does it have to do with animals? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I don't know how to take a break. I try to take a break for like 4 days and I just feel all weird and bad. And so I feel like I'm always making something. But yeah, I'm working on a new book project and I'm really excited about it. It's different than Shark Heart, like not a continuation of this world. And I feel like Shark Heart like asks like a lot about like life's grief. Like how do I live in the moment, like knowing that, I mean, not to be bleak here, but one day I will lose everything and everyone. How do I just be okay right now? And I think that was like the mystery that I was living with in life at the time that I wrote this. And I think my current mystery in my own like psyche and heart is just around rage. And as a woman, like I feel like I haven't been taught to process or be angry productively. And I'm just curious about that. I'm curious about that emotion. And I think a lot of the next book is an exploration of that, like rage and power. And yeah, it's different. I get kind of bored if I do the same thing twice in a row. So expect something different.
Yeah. I think, yeah, what else could we expect? I think that's that's like your MO. So yes. I have a couple more questions, but I'm wondering if people in the chat, if anyone has some questions before we get to our last few here. Feel free to let
Maybe
us know.
Jessica, because we always like to ask too, since you said you are a lover of reading too, is there anything that you've been reading lately that you love? Because we always like to jot those things down if you have any, recent favorites or all-time favorites.
Yeah, recent favorites. Okay, so I made this recommendation the other day to someone and they like laughed in my face because it's so close to Shark Heart. But I recently read Whale Fall by Daniel Kraus.
Yes.
And I was like, this is kind of creepy. Like the parallels between the father and the son story and the mother, I mean, and daughter relationship in Shark Heart. And there's even like, I don't think this is a spoiler. There's a character at the very end named Joy. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, were we in some kind of mind hive? So I really like that book. It's definitely structured differently, but it also has the short chapters, which I super love. And me just look at my shelf. Oh, I recently read You Could Make This Place Beautiful, the Maggie Smith memoir. Oh, it was gorgeous. I just felt like it was super relatable. Even though I'm not going through a divorce, I felt like I could just apply so much of her insight to my own life. So those are two that I've really loved lately.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Whalefall came out in the same month too, right?
Like days apart. It's
Okay.
We need to be
Yeah.
events together. I'm trying to get a hold of them.
Mikey, do you want to chat?
Sure, I guess if that's allowed. Is that fair? Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
So, because I have a question that has nothing to do with the book, so which makes it sound like I didn't read it at all, but I promise I did and loved it.
You definitely
So,
read it.
and I'm gonna ask myself a question, then answer, and then I'll ask you a similar one. So, if you would have told me last year that, hey, Mikey, I have your favorite book for 2023 or one of your favorites, I'm like, okay, and it's subtitled Love Story. I'm like, haha, that's a good one. And then, but I knew as soon as I was looking at it, I wonder if there's any thought about subtitling it.
Oh no,
Mikey.
we lost you, Mikey.
We can come back. We're at subtitles.
Yeah. Cliffhanger.
It's okay. Hang out.
Oh, are you back, Mikey?
I don't
Okay.
know, am I?
Yeah, you're
Yes.
back. You're back.
You're back.
I love connection. I love the internet. It's fantastic.
Amazing.
I, it showed all forms of love, and I thank you for that. This really was a love story because love is so multifaceted, and I really appreciate that. And because I would have, maybe I would, but I knew, I know this is going to be a fit. And as soon as I was sharp, I never read the inside covers ever. So I go in and okay, I see this could be brilliant, and it absolutely was. And so, two is if there were a time traveler that came to you 10 years ago, maybe when you're in the thick of theater, said your first novel is going to captivate readers everywhere, and oh, by the way, someone in it's going to turn a giant arc in the book. What would you have said to that? Would you have been like, "Whoa, that's really weird," or "I can see that"? I mean, what would be your reaction to that? Thinking
Okay.
back.
Thinking back, oh man, I would have lost my mind. I don't know. Like I feel like I really identify. I've in some ways, like parts of my path, I really have felt like Lewis, where just really wanting to share my work with the world, but just experiencing a lot of rejection and kind of just not knowing how to get to that place. And yeah, I think myself like 10 years ago would have just been over the moon with this and beyond. But what's interesting about the mind I've noticed is that, or my mind, I should say, is that the goalpost just moves. Like now there are new things that I want to do and experience. And I'm trying to remember that I mean, it sounds so easy, but just like to be like grateful and satisfied for the moment and recognize that the moment is complete. Like, I mean, I am grateful and satisfied in the moment. And sometimes I'm just like, can I just leave it at that? Can I just be there instead of adding an and to it? And
right.
Yeah. So, and I think you were a little choppy for the first part, but you were asking about the subtitle,
I was curious if like when there's some connection. I was curious if you knew from the start if that subtitle had to be there. Like you were sure no matter the title has to be Shark Heart: a love story. Like it absolutely has to be, because without it, it feels lesser than, or if that was a development that came later.
It was so much later. It's such a good question. No one's asked me this before. Yeah, no, that was like my mastermind editor. Fun fact, I really dislike giving things titles and naming characters. For some reason, it just feels embarrassing. I have no idea. Like just like it's like I think I have a problem like taking up space or having authority, but like picking a character's name just feels like, oh, they're just all like dumb and weird. And same with titles. So the original title was way too long and it was more of a placeholder. And I think titles change a lot in publishing. Like the original, I'm like fairly certain the working title I have for my current project is it's probably going to go like 10 times over. So I knew the title had to change. And I was just making a list of words that were kind of interesting. And I was in a meeting with my editor and my agent. And I was like, I am stumped on this title. Like I had spent like months, like just in the car with my boyfriend. We just like play like word games. Like we'd drive by and we'd see a sign. We'd be like, Ocean Street. Like, like what about that? Yeah, it was so difficult. And I just read this list of words and I happened to have the word shark and heart next to each other.
Mm.
And the editor was like, shark heart. And I was like, yeah, actually, when I thought about it, I was like, they both have shark hearts. Like, really, I think Ren has more of a shark heart in the sense that she's like ruthless and brave in her pursuit for love. Like how I said earlier, like in the carnivorous way, like she's had a lot of resistance, but still moves forward. And then Lewis has a literal shark heart. And the love story part was also my editor. It was a very dramatic moment. She was like, shark heart, a love story. Like, okay, like so it was like really not something that came from me. But that's it's so great to have a team, like, and then she's so smart to pick a title that is easy to say and spell and remember. Like I think those things are really important in getting the word out about a book.
Yeah, Melissa mentioned in the comments, like the love story edition almost made her skip it. And I didn't, that was like a deterrent for me initially too, because I'm like, oh, it's going to be like a weird rom-com shark kissing like thing.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't at all. But I think like my expectations were just like so different than what you provided. And it was amazing and in the best way.
Oh, I'm so glad. I felt like it's a story about love more than like a love story in the classical sense.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Love that. I don't know if there's any more questions before we start signing off. We always do love to take a picture at the end. I don't know who has like their book with them, but it's always fun to take a group photo here. If I can figure out how to do 2 screens, I might just have to take 2 photos. Right, Kelly? Is that what we did before? 2 photos?
I think so, but then it was like the same. Some people were in both and some people were in both. Did I just say the same thing twice? Maybe.
I'm gonna try. I'll try. I'll do 2 screens. So, because I can't get everybody in the same screen. Okay. You guys ready? Okay, so 1, 2, 3. I'm going to do it again. I'm just going to go to my next screen and see if I missed anybody. Okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Yay! Oh, Emily, we're so happy for you. This is just like, what an exciting time. And like Kelly said, you deserve every amount of attention that this book is receiving. And it's just unlike anything.
Well, thank you all so much. It's really because of your voices. I did not, one voice can only be so loud. So if you loved it, thank you for telling other people. And I just can't wait to stay connected in the realms of Bookstagram or wherever else. Like, I don't know what my event schedule looks like coming up for the paperback, but hopefully I'll be around in a few stores, and it would be great to see you if you're local.
Yes.
And like remind me that you were here. It's really fun to make those connections.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was the best time. We're so happy for you, and we can't wait to see what you do next.
Oh, thank you, Kelly.
Thanks, Emily. Have a good night.
Bye, you too.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Kelly and Ivana.
Thank you. Hey. I'm gonna stop recording.
I always forget about that.